Electrobud was formed in 2009 during a Macintosh game developer competition called UDIV Games, hosted by idivgames.com. The game we worked on for that competition was called Syntropy. Syntropy is the unfinished action platformer I worked on for the Mac Game Developer Competition. The game has an emphasis on running from this planet-devouring monster. The development diary that we're doing right now won't actually be covering us working on Syntropy. We may do this later in the future. I'm still swaying back and forth between whether or not I want to develop this for Xbox with XNA and C#, or go the multi-platform route using OpenGL, C++, and SDL. So I'm still debating which way I want to go on that, and I've already begun making an engine in C++ using OpenGL. However, it's not far along enough to the point where I'm like, okay, this is what I'm going to use. So I can still change my mind. In case anyone was wondering what I used to make the original, I actually programmed that in Real Basic, which is essentially Visual Basic, along with an OpenGL plugin that let me use an OpenGL surface. So I encourage any VB naysayer to check that out. And yeah, you can make games in Visual Basic, although VB is pretty slow, so it's difficult to make a larger scale game. Electrobud's current project is an action puzzle rhythm-based game for the iPhone iPod Touch. So I got my IDE open, Xcode, that's what I'm using. I mean, you pretty much have to use Xcode if you're doing iPhone development. Well, I guess there's ways around that, but I'm using Xcode. Can you go ahead and do a build and debug? This is what I got so far. This is the code name for the project. It's not, this title screen is just temporary. But go to start the game. You can see it's standard puzzle game really. You got a block falling from the sky. You can see there's some interesting stuff going on here, like I can stretch this block out depending on its value. That's all part of the gameplay. You also see there's bubbles floating by with triangles. Right now I've got it set up so that when I hit the wrench, which this is the poorly drawn wrench in the corner that I did, it'll come up with a printout of the grid. And what this is basically showing me the values of all the grid spaces, because this is all these pieces are actually tied to a grid, and it's showing me the values of each space in the grid. It's just a 2D grid. All these 2's represent block spaces, and then you've got these 1's which represent the landing block, which I'll probably explain sometime later. Do something like this, and there's a corner. Triangle will land, and it'll orient itself so that it's hugging the wall. Go ahead and show how I'm doing this. One of the things I'm trying to do is get it so that when multiple triangles land on each other, it'll like grow the triangle beneath it. I don't know if I should explain the whole gameplay behind that. I'm not going to. We'll cut that out. So what happens is, and I'm not even sure if this is the best way to do it, this is the way I'm doing it, I just thought it was kind of neat, is like triangle, let's say there's a block here, and blocks are represented by 2's on the grid that I just showed you, so this would be a 2, and then you have the triangle that falls down, and what it does is it checks the adjacent spaces here, and it'll give them a value. All these are powers of 2. The way I got this is actually from thinking about binary, the values of like bits. They're always unique, even if it's like, if you have a long string of them, because they're powers of 2, you can add, you know, the previous ones, and it'll still come out with a unique number. I'm not sure if that was the best way to explain that, but, well, here's a way to explain it. So if I added all these 8 spaces together, they would be 255, and this space is 256. So there's never gonna be some ambiguity in whether or not the value is right, I guess is the way to put it. Only depending on where blocks are around it. When there's a block to the left of it, it's pretty easy. It just, you just say, okay, if it's on the left side, just rotate it so that it's like hugging that block. And if the block's on the right side, it's okay, hug it so that it's on that side. But what happens is when I have 2 triangles that are merging and the triangle grows, things get a little more complicated. Yeah, that's how I'm doing this.
When I worked on Syntropy with Tim, I did the art for the characters and the enemies, but I didn't do really any of the backgrounds. And I think one of the criticisms we got for the game was that it didn't really have a set cohesion. So this time around, I'm actually doing all the art, so it should naturally feel cohesive. But in addition to that, I'm trying to make it feel as together as possible. And that's one of the things I have to do a lot is, draw something up on my computer and then send it over to Tim and make sure that it looks alright on his screen, resolution and everything, and then he puts it onto his iPod Touch and gets that working, and then I can get an idea of whether or not what I did was successful. So that's one of the main goals I have in this sort of thing, and it's kind of amazing to look back on my art for Syntropy and my art for this, and it hasn't really been that long, but already through what I've learned in school, I've evolved a little bit more, so I'm excited to work on this project.